Welcome to Raise the Line from Osmosis.org, seeking solutions with leading experts on how to increase healthcare capacity so people can get the care they need during the COVID-19 crisis and beyond. In this special episode, we'll be talking to one of the winners of the 2020 Osmosis Raise the Line Faculty Awards. Only 5 were selected out of hundreds of nominations we received. Osmosis's engagement manager, Lindsey Smith, sat down with each of them to ask about their career, their methods, and their advice for future healthcare providers.
Dr. Pavlick, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on receiving one of the first Raise the Line Faculty Awards. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Raymond Pavlick. I work for the Physician Assistant Program at ATSU University in Arizona. I have a PhD in physiology from the University of California, Davis, and I've been educating PA students since 1997.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your background. What got you started in your career?
So when I was an undergraduate many years ago, I thought I was going to medical school. I worked as an ER tech for a number of years, leading up to the time that I had to make a decision to whether or not I was actually going to go to medical school. And while I was a student, I started tutoring and I enjoyed teaching and developed a passion for that. So I was kind of left with a quandary of, okay, do I go to medical school or do I go and get my PhD and think about a career in teaching? So I applied to both programs, hoping that I would get into one and not the other, and the decision would be made for me by default. Didn't work out that way. I got into both types of schools, and so I had to decide myself. And I went the way of getting my PhD. I did my undergraduate at University of California, Davis, so I ended up staying there and getting my doctorate as well. And I knew early on that I did not want to be a lab rat and carve out a career in research. I really enjoyed the teaching end of it. So when I finished my doctorate, I started to apply to programs, or I should say I started to apply to institutions that had a teaching mission focus. And I landed here in Phoenix, working for a university called Grand Canyon University. And then it was 2 short years later after that I joined ATSU.
Can you speak about who inspired you or what got you into teaching?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to those days in undergrad again. Part of the way that I figured out that I enjoyed teaching is that when I would sit in class, I would watch how my professors taught. I was learning whatever subject they were teaching, but I found myself paying attention to their approach. And I was just fascinated by how different approaches existed amongst all these people that were trying to teach me. One person would do it this way, another person would do it that way. And I think that the person that influenced me the most was a general chemistry professor. His name was Dr. Wood, Fred Wood. And I had freshman chemistry with him in this big lecture hall, 600 students. And I was just amazed how he would slowly learn everyone's name in this huge lecture hall. And when someone raised their hand and asked a question, if he knew their name, he would say it. And I was like, how is he doing that? How is he picking out people in this huge lecture hall? And people gravitated toward him. They would go to office hours, they would introduce themselves. And he was just a master at how he paced himself, the approach that he took, like I said, being personable, knowing people's name, the way that he explained things. I just thought it was the coolest thing. And I think that's kind of what got me started about thinking in regards to a career in teaching. He was kind of the one that got me really, again, comparing himself to other people and how they taught. So I kind of look back, to those early years, and I think in many ways I model myself after what he did. But there's a lot of other people too that certainly influence you. You kind of take a little bit from this person, a little bit from that person, and you kind of mold it into how you want to approach being an educator. So
Fred would.
yeah, don't know where Fred is. I don't know if he's still teaching or if he's retired. So many of the professors that I had, back in the late 1980s when I was in undergrad have certainly retired. Some have passed away. But I still make it back to UC Davis to visit at least once a year to catch up with some friends. Yeah, my folks still live in Sacramento, so when I go back to visit them, I make a side trip to Davis all the time to see how things are there.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to read an excerpt from one of your nominations. Dr. Pavlick has a gift for teaching and connecting with students. He has skillfully broken down difficult concepts into understandable information. Dr. Pavlick fully embodies the open arms value. From day one, he invited participation and responded to our countless questions and concerns about material and curriculum. I was very nervous about tackling pharmacology, but Dr. Pavlick made the topic interesting, approachable, and memorable, and prepared us with resources we can reference as we enter clinic. How does that make you feel?
No, it's very humbling. Absolutely. I've told some of my colleagues at ATSU that have, congratulated me. I always say, well, it's nothing that I did. It's an embodiment of the students that we recruit. I mean, they're very thoughtful. They really enjoy working with us. I love being able to spend time with the students in the classroom. Of course, that's been a challenge this year with COVID, with so much online instruction that's going on right now. But when you teach first year students, you kind of always have to remember what it's like to be in their shoes. So, the way that I teach is I just have to constantly remember that a lot of students are hearing about this content or this material for the first time. And so you have to put it in a way that they can understand it and digest it and piece it together. Again, going back to that earlier question, and the response that I had about watching other instructors, it's very easy as an expert in something to just start to lose people. You're up here and they're down here. And, I think one of the things that makes it easier for students to learn, makes them comfortable is to, again, bring it down to their level and then slowly ratchet it up to a point where, they get more advanced with their understanding and how they're, able to utilize that information. So, the students are going to be working with healthcare providers, or I should say they're going to be working with patients one day as healthcare providers. And, my message to them is always to pay it forward. If you really appreciate the way that I work with you and the way that I treat you, that's what I want you to do with the patients in your future career. So, it's nice to get thanked. It's nice to get, nominated and all of that. But ultimately, I want them to just pay it forward to those patients. That's who they're going to touch the most.
Our 6 core values are start with the heart, spread joy, have each other's backs, imagine more, open your arms, and reach further. Which one jumps out at you?
Yeah, I would say it's probably spread the joy, like you said. With the environment that we have been in most of my classes now, having been in the Zoom format, it's really easy to get down on yourself. It's really easy to feel isolated. So I think throughout this year, when our new class started up in July, we have tried to find ways to spread the joy. And so I think that's what's kept all of us going. I know the students have really had a lot of fun in seeing our houses, seeing our pets, seeing our spouses. I think one of the rewards in all of this is that they kind of get introduced to our outside life a little bit more, which I know, some people aren't as comfortable doing that. I've never had those problems or concerns. Again, I think it helps students to identify with you more. But yeah, the ability to spread the joy has probably been more important than ever with our students, because again, they're spending a lot of time in their apartments. They're spending a lot of time in isolation, away from others. I think I remember telling one of our colleagues at Osmosis, I think it was Amber, we've also created some little dance videos for the students and things like that. So, whatever it takes, to keep their attention, keep them wanting to learn, keep them reminded as to why they're doing this. I think that spread the joy has been more important than ever.
COVID has brought unique challenges to everyone. What has your personal experiences been like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think through all of this, I think one of the things that I've learned is that, even though you don't have the physical contact in the classroom, even though you cannot see body language as well as you could in the classroom, there are still effective ways to teach. Again, I think students connect with people no matter what environment you're in. I mean, as long as you demonstrate a passion, as long as you demonstrate a command of what you're talking about. And again, some of those things we discussed earlier, you're responsive, you're caring, you go the extra mile. All that can come through on camera. It's not as easy, I think, but if you're still the same person that you are when you're in the classroom as you are on Zoom, that's going to come through. And students are very adaptable. I mean, as I get older and older, I get more set in my ways, and I remember what it was like to be more flexible when you're younger. And that certainly is what has carried the students. I mean, despite all of this, they're still learning, they're still plowing ahead. They're still interested, obviously, in becoming a PA. So I think I've learned, a lot of how resilient we all are, as instructors, as students, as coworkers. We still have those same values. We still have the same mission, the same drive to just, again, move forward, and eventually this will pass, just like everything else does. And we. I think we've also learned that we've become closer in some ways in that regard too. Again, you can't wrap your arms around somebody and hug them, but the message, like I said, still comes through. So
what's next for you? What are you and your team looking forward to doing in the coming months and years?
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to meeting the students in person, because I have not done that. We had our new class that started in July. And, the only things that happen on campus with the students are labs, and I don't teach any of the laboratory components of the curriculum. So I'm definitely looking forward to meeting people in person instead of by camera. I think I'm also just looking forward to, kind of getting back your identity in some ways. As I tell my wife, it's like, you're still kind of doing the same thing, but man, when you're home all the time, you kind of lose track of time, what day it is. It's just, everything is turned so upside down. But yeah, I look forward to the time we get back on campus. We can see each other. We can do more things. I think one of the things that I miss are some of the extracurricular activities that we do with students. Things like fundraising, adopting families at holiday time, where we can go out into the community and do these kinds of things. And certainly COVID has limited all of that. I mean, it's just been a piece that, has been, taken off to the side and not really been able to do much. So I always like those relationships that you can build with students outside the classroom just as much as inside. And that outside part, like I said, has kind of been non-existent.
So we're a teaching company. We love to fill knowledge gaps. Is there any topic you'd like to educate our audience about? Anything, your personal experiences or the PA programs at AT Stills University?
Well, you kind of maybe have just nailed it there with the suggestion you just made. I mean, I'm not a PA. I, like I said, have a PhD. So, but I've spent so much time in the PA community the last 20 years or so as an educator, and PAs are wonderful people. I mean, not that doctors aren't, that they are, but I just find that the physician assistants are just some of the most down-to-earth individuals. They clearly really love to spend time with patients. They work really hard, and they're qualified in what they do. I know that there's always scenarios that PAs go through where they walk into a room and they introduce themselves, and people are like, "Well, what does that mean? You're just the assistant? I want to see the real doctor." That's a common kind of thing that goes on in the PA world, and I think what a lot of the public may not understand, like I said, is just how qualified PAs are. That they fill a tremendous need in our healthcare system. They are well qualified, well trained, and in many ways, these are folks that really have the heart to want to do medicine. They usually end up going into the PA arena for a lot of different reasons, other than wanting to go to medical school. That we get the list all the time when we interview folks. But PAs. Like I said, I wish people understood more of what they do, and that comes with time and educating people. But they are a tremendous asset to the healthcare system.
What advice would you give people finishing medical school and entering the medical field during this pandemic?
It goes back to something we talked a little bit earlier about always paying it forward. I think as a society, the way that we hold on to our values is we make sure we pass those on to the next person and the next person and the next person. And like I said before, it's great to receive the award. I will always cherish the fact that that I was nominated and that I won. But it goes back to those reasons that students chose me. I want them to not pay it forward to me, but pay it forward, like I said, to those patients. That's what's gonna really make the next generation and the next generation of PAs that much more solid. I think you always have to remember why you got into medicine in the first place. And so when patients come first and everything is centered around them, then why you're doing it and why you chose the profession that they did.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Raymond. Anything you'd like to add? Anyone you'd like to thank?
No, God. I mean, thanks to all the students. They're the joy of why we come to work and why we do what we do. A shout out to all my colleagues at ATSU. That we have the best team that I think one could ever assemble in our department, both faculty and staff. Our upper administration is always supportive of our efforts, and so I can honestly say that the 20 plus years that I've spent at ATSU have been very rewarding, and I couldn't have chosen a better place to develop my career.
For more information on how you can help raise the line and flatten the curve, go to osmosis.org/COVID-19. If you like this podcast, please share it on your social channels. You can also subscribe to the series and check out all of our podcasts at osmosis.org/raisethelines podcast.